Man arrested at the pub illegally by cops. Turns out he is a police captain. What would you do if the people sworn to protect you turned against you? What if the badge they wore, the same one you trusted all your life, suddenly became a symbol of betrayal? This is the story of one night, one arrest, and one man who wasn't supposed to be on the other side of the cuffs. But what happens when the person arrested is someone who knows the system inside out, because he's part of it? And what if those officers didn't realize that the man they just humiliated is their superior? Keep watching to find out how a night out at the pub spiraled into a chilling revelation about power, race, and what justice really means. It was a quiet Thursday evening when Captain Michael Dawson decided to grab a drink at his local pub. He wasn't in uniform, no one knew his rank, and that's the way he liked it. Just another face in the crowd. After all, he'd spent over 20 years working his way up in the police force. He deserved a night off. But then the unexpected happened. The door swung open, and in walked 3 officers, 2 men and a woman, radiating the kind of energy that turns heads. They were new recruits, unfamiliar faces. To the other patrons, they were just cops on duty. But to Dawson, they were much more. Why were they here? They glanced around, scanning the room, and settled their eyes on him. Why him? He wasn't causing trouble. He wasn't doing anything except enjoying his drink. Was it because of his skin color? His heart rate picked up. Dawson had seen this kind of scene unfold too many times. Innocent men caught in the crosshairs of overzealous cops, but he never imagined it would be him. What was their agenda tonight? Without a word, they approached his table. "Sir, can we talk to you for a moment?" the female officer asked, her tone neutral, but laced with an unspoken tension. Dawson raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Is there a problem, officer? Identification, please." Now this was strange. He hadn't done anything to warrant suspicion. Why did they single him out? Was it racial profiling? Was it because he was a black man, sitting alone in a predominantly white neighborhood? A flicker of anger sparked in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "May I ask why you need my ID?" One of the male officers stepped in, his hand already resting on his belt. "We've had reports of suspicious behavior matching your description. We need to verify your identity." Suspicious behavior? Matching his description? It was the same vague excuse he'd heard so many times on the job, an excuse often used to justify unwarranted stops, particularly targeting minorities. Was this a case of mistaken identity or something darker? Dawson handed over his ID without a fuss, knowing full well that escalating the situation wouldn't help. He thought the matter would end there, but he was wrong. The officers huddled together, whispering, glancing at him now and then with narrowed eyes. Moments later, they returned. "Step outside with us, please." "Am I being detained?" "We just need to ask you a few questions." Dawson stood up, his height towering over the officers. He could feel the eyes of the other patrons on him. How quickly a casual night out had turned into a public spectacle. He felt his pulse thrum in his ears. Was this about to get worse? "Fine," he muttered, walking out of the pub with the officers trailing behind him. The minute they stepped outside, it happened. One of the officers reached for his handcuffs. "You're under arrest." "For what?" Dawson demanded, his voice booming now. He hadn't done anything wrong, and he sure as hell hadn't committed any crime. "I'm asking you again, what's the charge?" No answer. The cuffs clicked around his wrists, tight, unnecessary. What was going on here? The scene outside the pub quickly escalated. Bystanders pulled out their phones, recording every second of Dawson's public humiliation. He could feel the heat of shame creeping up his neck, but he wasn't just any man in cuffs. He was a captain in the same police force that was arresting him. Illegally. Would they even believe him if he told them? As they shoved him into the back of the police car, his mind raced. Should he reveal his identity now? Would it make a difference? Or would that only make things worse? A black man in a suit might look out of place in this neighborhood, but a black man in a police uniform held a whole different kind of power and threat. Was that what this was really about? Power? The ride to the precinct felt like hours. He could hear the officers chatting casually up front, completely unaware of the colossal mistake they'd just made. But Dawson didn't want to play the get-out-of-jail-free card too early. Not yet. He needed to see how deep this injustice went. What would happen next? By the time they reached the station, Dawson had made up his mind. He'd let the system work, or fail, and then reveal who he truly was. As they led him through the doors, the officers barely acknowledged his presence. They were smug, confident that they had caught their man. They didn't even bother to explain the charges, because there were none. How many innocent men had walked through these doors before him, arrested for no reason? How many had been processed, humiliated, just like this? And how many of them had simply disappeared into the system? Would he be one of them now? It wasn't until they tried to book him that things took a dramatic turn. Dawson calmly requested to make a phone call. The officer at the desk looked annoyed, but gave in. Dawson dialed the number for his chief. "Yes, it's me. I'm at the precinct. No, not working. I've been arrested." "Yes, you heard that right. Get down here." The officers in the room froze.
If you've watched this far, comment which country you're watching from and leave a 100 in the comment section because you are type of person that likes to finish what they started. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to get notified whenever we drop new videos. Now back to the story.
The officer on the other side of the phone replied, "Arrested? Captain, is this some kind of joke?" The word captain echoed through the station like a bomb going off. What would the officers do now? The color drained from the officers' faces. They had just arrested their captain. Dawson stood there, handcuffed and glaring, as the reality of their mistake settled in. They fumbled to remove the cuffs, stammering apologies, but it was too late. The damage had been done. The video recordings had already hit social media, and the story was out. The officer's superior arrived within minutes, disbelief written across his face. But Dawson didn't want sympathy. He wanted justice. He wanted answers. Why had they profiled him? Why hadn't they bothered to check his ID properly? How many others had fallen victim to their blind arrogance? The incident sparked an internal investigation, and Dawson made sure it wasn't swept under the rug. The officers were placed on suspension pending the outcome. But the questions remained. Would this incident lead to real change? Or would it just be another footnote in the long history of police misconduct? Would anyone truly be held accountable? As Dawson sat in his office days later, still reeling from the ordeal, he couldn't help but wonder. What if he wasn't a captain? What if he had been just another black man in the wrong place at the wrong time? Would anyone have believed him then? Would anyone have cared? Dawson's case made headlines, but it was just one example of a deeper, more insidious problem. Racial profiling, police misconduct, and systemic racism were issues that went far beyond his personal story. Would this case be the catalyst for real reform? Or would it be forgotten like so many others? The tension lingered in the air long after the story broke. Dawson returned to his duties, but nothing felt the same. The badge he wore no longer symbolized justice in his eyes. It was a reminder of the fight still ahead. A fight for fairness, for accountability, and for a future where no one, not even a police captain, is above the law. But the bigger question remained. Who would hold the system accountable if the system itself is broken? Would justice ever truly be blind? This story draws us into a complex web of power, race, and authority, leaving us with one pressing question. How can a system built to protect sometimes become the very thing that endangers the people it serves?